Federalist 20, Part 2. Okay, remember in Federalist 20, he's going to be talking about the deficiencies of the Confederacy of the United Netherlands. In 18, he looked at the deficiencies of confederacies of Greece, ancient Greece. In 19, he looked at the deficiency of confederacy of the Germanic Confederacy, calls it. Here, he's looking at the United Netherlands. So I'll continue. As stadtholder of the Union, he has, however, considerable prerogatives. In his political capacity, he has authority to settle disputes between the provinces when other methods fail, to assist at the deliberations of the States General and at their particular conferences, to give audiences to foreign ambassadors, and to keep agents for his particular affairs at foreign courts. In his military capacity, he commands the federal troops, provides for garrisons, and in general regulates military affairs, disposes of all appointments from colonels to ensigns, and of the government and posts of fortified towns. In his marine capacity, it's in charge of Navy. Marine here means Navy. He is Admiral General and superintends and directs everything relative to naval forces and other naval affairs, presides in the admiralties in person or by proxy, appoints lieutenant admirals and other officers, and establishes councils of war whose sentences are not executed till he approves them. His revenue, exclusive of his private income, amounts to 300,000 florins. The standing army, which he commands, consists of about 40,000 men. Such is the nature of the celebrated Belgic Confederacy, as delineated on parchment. What are the characters which practice has stamped upon it? Imbecility in the government, discord among the provinces, foreign influence and indignities, a precarious existence in peace, and peculiar calamities from war. Anytime you hear him say the word imbecile or imbecility, he's talking about it with disgust, with horror, with anger. He says, this thing is not working at all. It's not efficient, it's not energetic, it does not stand up to what it promises. And another important thing that you want to remember when he uses the word parchment, or sometimes they use the word parchment barriers, they're talking about on the piece of paper or on that animal skin that they used to write important documents. He says they look good on a written paper or on a written document, but if you don't have the system set up right, then any authoritarian person or group of people can tear it apart, push it aside. So he says, on paper, what we talked about on top, all these powers that stadtholder and their States General has, they look good, but when you look at them, it's awful. Experience has shown otherwise. So remember, this is very important. Every time you hear that word parchment or parchment barrier, he's saying that if you don't have the system of checks and balances, separation of powers, judicial independence, all these things in place where you're actually realizing, you're actually accepting that human beings cannot be trusted with power. You have to create the system in a way where if somebody got out of hand, some other groups within the government can stop them. So he says, because of that, if you don't have the system right, then your constitution might become a parchment barrier. You get the first president and then he decides to rule for life. You might have elections, but that doesn't mean anything because you're really not getting the best people for the job. You don't have division of powers, separation of powers, checks and balances. So pay attention to that. It was long ago remarked by Grotius that nothing but the hatred of his countrymen to the House of Austria kept them from being ruined by the vices of their constitution. Now, Grotius or Grotius, Grotius, you're looking at the text. He was a Dutch scholar and a juristic thinker, and one of his main works was called On the Law of War of Peace. It was written in 1625, and he's come to be known as one of the most important, or the first of a few of experts on international law. So he says, even Grotius says that if they had not been afraid of Austria, this united Netherlands would have been a joke. They really would not have stayed united. Let me just talk about another subject. It happens that just last weekend, I was watching C-SPAN, and on Book TV, they had a book featured called Internationalists. And part of that book talks about, it's co-authored, 2 authors have written it. Part of that book talks about Grotius, Hugo Grotius. But the reason I bring this up is because I have told you a few times that this is one of the best resources that you can find to learn about the American civilization. So just want to highlight that. This is very important. Take advantage of this. It's excellent. Yeah, watch all the C-SPAN programming you can, because it's not only on politics or government, it's history. They have authors that talk about literature, books that have been written about religions. Religion in America. They have recently, they're doing a much better job of touring different areas of the United States, especially the historical areas. So for some of us who cannot either afford to go there, don't have the time, it is very important that we can watch and learn from these programmings. And for you, since you do not speak English as a first language, it's a great resource because most of their programmings, they also add transcript to it. It might not be exactly word for word. They might miss a word here or there, but it's important that you take advantage of it. Okay, next short paragraph. The Union of Utrecht, says another respectable writer, reposes an authority in the States General seemingly sufficient to secure harmony but the jealousy in each province renders the practice very different from theory. The same instrument, says another, obliges each province to levy certain contributions, but this article never could and probably never will be executed, because the inland provinces who have little commerce cannot pay an equal quota. Okay, here he says inland provinces, means the provinces in United Netherlands that do not border the Pacific Ocean, do not border water. See, right now, all the 13 states of the United States border water, but they are thinking about the future. All these other states that are going to come, and they're going to be landlocked. In other words, they won't be, one side of them won't have a shore along either the ocean or the Gulf. So he says some of these landlocked provinces over there in United Netherlands, because they don't have a lot of commerce, they can't pay that much into the treasury. And he's reminding Americans that, remember, if we expand, all these states are going to be settled, and if they feel like they're somehow getting cheated for one reason or another by these different states or confederacies, if we don't unite, says that will create war and mayhem. So that's kind of something you need to keep kind of pay attention to as we go on, because that is something they need to consider. If a state is landlocked and it's in here and cannot easily get their cargoes to the ocean-going ships to trade, they always might think that their neighboring states are cheating them, or the neighboring state might tax their products. So you never know. He's saying beware that this is going to create wars for us.